Yeah, I mean, we're loving it. I mean, you see what the fans have done with 25%. So, having essentially twice that amount it's going to be huge for us, and it's going to be a loud stadium, and even the last couple of weeks with a quarter percent, with a quarter of the capacity that we're allowed. It's been louder than I've ever heard it in my 3 years of being here. So we're all super excited to have it at 50, and I know the fans are too.
And that, of course, the voice of South Carolina veteran Andrew Hutchinson, outfielder and middle of the order hitter for the Gamecocks, getting ready for this showdown with number one Arkansas starting on Thursday. Currently a Thursday, Friday, Saturday matchup. If we're sort of looking into our crystal ball, may actually turn into a Thursday, Friday matchup, potential doubleheader. We'll wait and see, an official announcement on that. But the Gamecocks getting ready for a marquee matchup, marquee series. And just like we said yesterday, we had a Tuesday show this week. We're going to give this matchup the sort of football week game day type treatment as far as how we cover it here on the show, how we cover it on the site. And then assuming there still is a spring game on Saturday, we're going to maybe give the spring game the real game treatment on Friday as well. So welcome into the show. Wednesday afternoon, of course. Hopefully everybody got the memo. Hopefully everybody is going to join us shortly here in the chat. What's up to everybody that already is in? And, of course, what's up to our friend and presenting sponsor, that is Clint Hammond. Check out Clint at clinthammond.com or give him a call, 803-771-6933. Clint is, of course, with the Mortgage Network here in Columbia, right across the road from Dreher High School. If you are in the market for a new home, maybe you've been thinking about trading up, give Clint a shout. He can find you a great interest rate. Or if you just want to maybe save a little bit of money by refinancing, which a lot of people are doing right now, Clint is your guy. So, again, that's Clint Hammond of the Mortgage Network, clinthammond.com, 803-771-6933. Gamecocks, number one Arkansas coming to town. Chris, I kind of think, dude, this is one of those weekends. If you're a sports fan, this is like why you sort of even follow sports. If you're a South Carolina fan, let's not let weekends like are coming up sort of go by without acknowledging, like, hey, this is why you pull for your team. This is what you hope for, is to be in the conversation where these games matter. And, for a long time, we've talked about it on the football side of things. It's been a while since South Carolina has been in one of these SEC matchups where it matters in the standings. It matters in sort of where you're going to be postseason wise. We got used to that all the time when Steve Spurrier was the football coach. You got used to that all the time at the latter part and really most of the Ray Tanner era at South Carolina. It was here or there when Chad Holbrook was the baseball coach here. And now you get a taste of it this weekend. There's going to be several massive series for South Carolina moving forward. But other than postseason play, which is a whole nother animal, but as far as regular season goes, a chance to beat the number one team in the country at your place, to continue to move up in the standings in the SEC, and to get some marquee victories on your resume with postseason play fairly close around the corner, doesn't get much better than this as far as regular season play goes.
Yeah, and I think the reality of playing a series against Arkansas and some of the other teams that South Carolina is going to face down the stretch, we talked about this a lot, how difficult the schedule is in SEC play once South Carolina opened it. It does not get any easier. I mean, Arkansas, look at the Mississippi schools. You look at Tennessee, who's even better than anticipated this year. They've been a top 10 ball club this year. South Carolina, it's almost like most weekends, not all, but most weekends for them, it's almost going to be as difficult as if they were in Omaha right now playing. Like these are the types of matchups. Like they're playing series against multiple teams this year that are good enough, A, to make it to Omaha, B, to probably win the whole thing, right? And they're playing that week in and week out. And so all these are very meaningful. They're all against great opponents. And here's the cool thing for South Carolina is this, Wes, that you feel like South Carolina is right there with all these teams because they've proven that they can pretty much play with anybody this year based on what we've seen so far. Now, we'll have to see how it plays out against Arkansas, against Mississippi schools, against Tennessee. How's the postseason go? We don't know any of that stuff. But we do know this is a team that is a postseason team. And we know this is a team that's good enough to be a team that can make some noise once it gets to the postseason. But these series, like you said, are going to shape that. But I think if you even just boil it down very simply, it's just this, that Arkansas is really good, South Carolina is really good, and it's going to be a really cool matchup and should be a really good atmosphere like Andrew Geister was talking about at the beginning of the video there.
Yeah, 50% capacity. If you're a South Carolina fan who was dying, to actually get into the stadium, maybe if you haven't been able to go to a game, or B, just to see a little bit better atmosphere, happened to come at a perfect time as far as in the context of sports, as far as baseball goes. There's been, if you even listening on, on TV, on the radio, there's been some really good atmospheres already. You got to think you're going to have sort of the some of your most diehard fans are going to be in the building for these games and should be an outstanding atmosphere. Anytime, now granted, like you said, man, South Carolina, they're playing great teams every week, but anytime you face number one, there's an added emphasis. There's a little extra excitement in the building. There's a little extra buzz in the clubhouse if you're South Carolina. And, I thought, so by the way, we're going to be joined, should have led off with this, Andrew Hutchinson, who covers baseball on hogbeat.com. That's the Arkansas rival site. As I said yesterday, not all sites basically cover baseball the way Gamecock Central does or the way the other, networks in the South Carolina market do, the other sites in the South Carolina market do. But there are some markets that do sort of put that emphasis on baseball. Arkansas is one of those. Hogbeat.com is one of those. So we're going to sort of treat this, again, like a big football matchup. So we'll have Andrew Hutchinson on to join us actually probably in about 5-6 minutes to give us the Arkansas perspective, tell us a little bit about what makes this team tick. But I was looking over at their site, just sort of maybe trying to read up on Arkansas a little bit. And as those of you who follow college baseball know, there are way too many polls in college baseball. And something Hogbeat does, or I think maybe we even should just copy this on Gamecock Central. They take 6 of the top polls. That's Baseball America, Collegiate Baseball, D1 Baseball, Perfect Game, the NCBWA, and the USA Today Coaches Poll. And they do basically a consensus, like a composite poll. And as good as these teams are that South Carolina has faced, at least to this point, at least according to all the pollsters, Arkansas is the cream of the crop so far. Number one in all 6 of those polls that I just mentioned. Now, the funny thing is, so actually by the composite poll this weekend, and I kind of like, I know this isn't an official poll. I kind of like going by this poll, though, knowing what all goes into it. This is a top 10 matchup this weekend. Number 1, Arkansas. Number 10, South Carolina, if you take basically this version that Hogbeat put together. But, dude, you look at this poll, Arkansas 1, and you'll see a trend here. Vanderbilt 2, Texas 3, Mississippi State 4, Tennessee 5. So South Carolina has played or will play all 5 teams in this poll. Again, South Carolina 10, Ole Miss 12, Florida 14. So, no matter how you dice this schedule up, it's a situation where you are going to be, if you're South Carolina, like you said, you're having Omaha weekends like every other weekend of the season, but that prepares you. I firmly believe that trip to Texas, where South Carolina lost all 3 games, you would say by any meaningful way of determining winners and losers, that was a losing weekend for South Carolina at Texas, lost all 3 games. But I firmly believe that prepares you for the rigors of SEC play. Maybe South Carolina won that third game against Vanderbilt because of being battle tested at Texas. Maybe they came from behind and beat LSU in game one of the doubleheader this past weekend because of that trip to Texas. You never know sort of what these learning experiences, you can't quantify it, but I believe it matters. So this is a schedule. If South Carolina ultimately survives and gets a good bid in the tournament, you're going to be able to lean back on all these experiences. They're not going to see anything in postseason play that they haven't been consistently seeing throughout conference play. And I think ultimately, if you survive, which South Carolina has done a good job of really giving themselves a little cushion, if you survive, it pays off in the end.
It does. And you're exactly right. There will be no shocks for this South Carolina team in the postseason, whether it's SEC tourney, a regional. If South Carolina was able to march to Omaha, every single team in Omaha, South Carolina wouldn't look at any of those guys and go, man, they're just so much better than anybody we play in the regular season. I mean, it might be a bunch of teams on their schedule for all we know. It just depends on how all that shakes out. But, I mean, you're right, man. I mean, Arkansas, when you look at them, going back to them as a ball club, and South Carolina is really good too, but we discussed them a lot. To look at Arkansas, I mentioned this on yesterday's show. You look at the schedule they've played, it's crazy difficult as well. And a bunch of those top 5, top 10 teams that you mentioned, they've beaten. They've beaten Mississippi State in a series. They've beaten Ole Miss in a series. They beat Texas. They beat Texas Tech in single games at the beginning of the season. They played, I think, Louisiana Tech, who's top 25 at the time. They played a lot of really good ball clubs too, and have not lost a series. And so same thing for them. So now at the same time, South Carolina, obviously a really good team. So it's not like this will be without test for Arkansas as well. This is going to be a test for them in addition to that.
So we'll be joined shortly by Andrew Hutchinson. I just sent him the link. He'll be popping in whenever he gets a chance. They actually were just completing their press conference. So Dave Van Horn, Arkansas head coach, he had his deal, I guess, this afternoon. Mark Kingston spoke today on the South Carolina end. Andrew Eister, as you heard a little bit from if you were here at the very beginning of the show, he spoke as well. So Colin Taylor, of course, have all the breakdowns, the game stories, the previews, all that stuff on Gamecock Central. But we'll have Andrew on here shortly. By the way, I see a couple of comments I'm going to get to before we get to Andrew asking about Mike Woods. As Chris fumbles his microphone.
Just
hopefully no fumbles for the Gamecocks on Saturday. Get that one out of the way. But Chris, this Mike Woods thing has taken on a mind of its own. I gotta tell y'all, I gotta go ahead. Just go ahead. I'm not even gonna let you down easy. I'm just gonna let you down. Don't get your hopes up on that. We speculated Texas yesterday because it made a lot of sense. That could still be the case as we've gathered information. Oklahoma has been the one that has come up the most. Chris, I don't know if you've heard or read anything in the last 22 hours since then, if there are other teams, but I posted on Gamecock Central yesterday afternoon right after the show. I said Oklahoma is where to watch. That's the one to look out for. A lot of times, guys, when a team or when a player goes into the portal, he already has a good idea of where he's headed. So I would look for a team other than South Carolina. I know everybody is putting their putting 2 and 2 together and saying, oh, this guy played for Justin Stepp. Lots of respect there. Don't get me wrong. Tons of respect there with Justin Stepp. But I think the Mike Woods thing for Gamecock fans, you can just go ahead and flush that. It's probably not going to be South Carolina, so don't get your hopes up on that one. You still in that same boat, Chris, as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with you there, man, from what we've gathered.
And without further ado, let's go out now and bring him in. It's Andrew Hutchinson, our good friend from the Arkansas Rivals site, hogbeat.com. Andrew, I was just telling everybody, not all sites, not all sort of network sites cover baseball necessarily the way South Carolina sites do or Arkansas sites do, but it's really cool. I noticed y'all cover baseball about like we do over here, just like almost a football weekend. So what has the excitement level been like within that fan base for this Arkansas team that is essentially consensus number one right now. I got to imagine there's a lot of excitement in y'all's neck of the woods.
Yeah, I mean, everybody is really fired up about this baseball team. They are, I mean, there's always an excitement about baseball in Arkansas, and it's even more so now, and it's just kind of steadily built. I mean, just think about 3 years ago with the 2018 team making it all the way on the verge of winning a national championship, and in 2019 making it to the College World Series, and obviously last year the COVID happened, but it just is kind of just steadily built. And I think everyone's expectation now is, we're going to make a trip to Omaha. And so, yeah, I mean, it's and the way the season has gone this year, it's reached a fever pitch, really.
Yeah, Andrew, thanks for joining us, man. Chris Clark here. Big fan of what y'all do over there at Hog Beat. As Wes said, I'll echo that. So looking at this team, obviously off the top of my head, 30-6. Like Wes said, consensus number one, really impressive. I think surface level, just looking at it, you think of Arkansas and you think of the hitting, but break down, if you can, just broad overview, the strengths of this team, why Arkansas is thriving like they are. And then if you have seen, what are the vulnerabilities, if any, of this team?
Well, the strength is definitely the lineup. I mean, they have power 1 through 9. I think Matt Goodhart currently leads the team with 11 home runs, but Brady Slavens has 10. A couple other guys have 9 or 8, 7. I mean, they've got a guy that hardly ever plays in Charlie Welch, who's like a backup DH. He's technically listed as a catcher, but he's probably the third string catcher, and he's got 5 home runs. And so, I mean, it's just unreal. I've never seen quite this much power. They've got 70 home runs, and I think they're like 10 ahead of the pace that they had in 2018 when they hit a school record 98 home runs. So I think they're going to shatter the school record, probably going to lead the country in that category. So they're just really good. And they also get on base a lot. I think that kind of gets overshadowed by the power, but they have a really good on base percentage. They're just constantly on base. They're not afraid to take walks. They get hit by pitches. So it really just a really good approach. The batting average probably isn't as high as maybe traditional fans would like, but when you factor in the slugging, the on-base percentage, it's a phenomenal offense. Now, as far as potential weaknesses, it's a legitimate weakness, I think, is the starting pitching. This was something I was worried about before the season started, and it's proven to be the case. I mean, there were several guys that they were looking at as potential weekend starters, but it's kind of like, when you, in football, when you have 2 quarterbacks, you don't have one. That's kind of how I felt about the starting pitching. You've got 6 or 7 starters. You don't really have 3. There is no Blaine Knight. There is no Isaiah Campbell on this roster. And so it's been kind of a revolving door on the weekend rotation, and consistently guys are, getting pulled after 3-4 innings, and they're asking the bullpen to do a lot. And so the fact that they are 30-6 at this point is really incredible, because just looking at it right now, like I'm trying to look at it and say, okay, what is this team capable of winning a national championship? Which, when you're ranked number 1 in the country, that's kind of what people are thinking. That could be what costs them or prevents them from winning the first title in school history is their starting pitching, especially when you think, they're probably in line to host. And I think I don't think they're going to lose at Baum-Walker Stadium in a regional or a super regional. But when you get to TD Ameritrade, the whole thing changes. You can't really rely on hitting a bunch of home runs in that ballpark. So that could be what kind of holds them back. And who knows, it could lead to some trouble during the second half of the SEC season.
Andrew, it actually kind of reminds me a little bit of there are parallels between Arkansas and South Carolina's baseball program. If you go back before basically Ray Tanner's first run at Omaha, where South Carolina went to Omaha 3 straight times, they were not able to win the big game, take it all home, but basically had teams every single year that if one thing goes differently for them, maybe they do. Those teams were loaded with power hitters. They got out there, obviously not TD Ameritrade at the time, but they got out there, more spacious ballpark, and the game just changes a little bit out there. So I think there are definitely parallels too with the fan bases sort of being at the point where you almost lose sight of how hard it is to get to Omaha, and it spoils everybody a little bit. But man, let's go back to this lineup. I was looking up and down it. You detailed it a little bit, but most impressive to me is not just how well they have hit as far as the power, but like you said, they're willing to take their walks. And, I look at this weekend, I was looking at some SEC stats, and South Carolina's pitching staff, as far as walks allowed, is I don't have the exact number in front of me anymore, but it's like middle of the pack, not terrible at putting guys on, not outstanding at, avoiding that. And then look at Arkansas. They're like tops in the league in home runs, tops in the league in walks, tops in the league in slugging and RBIs, I think. So to me, if you're going to go ahead and like circle in statistically on one key this weekend, it's probably that South Carolina avoids putting Arkansas in those positions for the 2 and 3 run home runs. These guys are probably going to get their home runs from time to time, but I would think the key is not to give them anything from a South Carolina perspective and make them sort of earn that and make them hit multiple solo shots, it seems.
Yeah, I completely agree. You cannot put this offense, give them base runners, because they will make you pay. They have an ability to, even when they're not hitting home runs, I mean, they can, hit doubles. They can, keep a rally going like that. So they feed off each other, it seems like. I mean, there have been so many innings this year where, they've scored 5, 6, 7 runs, and it's just, bam, it happens. And so that would definitely be a major key. And then also another thing I feel like I need to point out about this Arkansas team, I've never seen anything quite like it. How amazing they have been at coming back late in games. They have rallied and erased deficits unlike any team I've ever. I mean, it started very first weekend of the season when they were down in Arlington for that State Farm College Classic, whatever they're calling it, against the 3 Big 12 schools that are all really good in Texas Tech, TCU, and Texas. I mean, they had to score runs late, 7th, 8th inning to win those games. They had a fantastic comeback. I think it was against one of the Mississippi schools. I can't remember if it was Mississippi State or Ole Miss on the road. So they have the ability to just explode at any time offensively. And part of that is, when you give them free bases, they're going to make you pay.
Yeah, I mean, good point, Andrew. You look at this team, and even, I think I went and counted it, 13 games, they score 10 runs or more. They've put up, in the 20s against some of the lesser competition, 18-14 decision that maybe that was the one you referenced against Ole Miss earlier in the season. So Wes hit on walks for South Carolina. So here's where I wanted to go next. One of the best pitchers for South Carolina has actually been their Sunday starter, Will Sanders. He's really been a difference for them, in winning some of these past series where they drop game 1, win game 2. They're able to win game 3 because of the disparity in pitchers. Will Sanders not giving up more than 1 walk in any one single appearance this season. Tell us a little bit about Sundays for Arkansas. I saw a couple of the SEC series. They have won every SEC series, every series in general. But Sundays, they've dropped a couple games. Still won the series, but dropped a couple games. South Carolina's been good on Sundays. How has Arkansas been? Have they been a little bit more vulnerable on Sunday because of the pitching, as you outlined earlier?
I'm pretty sure this past weekend was the first Sunday that they've lost. I'll have to go back and double check that. But the last 2 Sundays have been absolutely bonkers for Arkansas. 2 weeks ago at Ole Miss, this was a rubber match. And Arkansas jumps out to an 11-0 lead. And so you're thinking, all right, they're going to cruise. I can, I could get started on my story. It's going to be done right when the game ends. It's going to be awesome. And then sure enough, Ole Miss, very, very good team, starts chipping away. And next thing you know, it's a tie ball game. Arkansas, I think it won't. So it was 11-0, and it was like 14-6. And then next thing you know, it's 14-14 in the 7th inning or 8th inning or something like that. Arkansas ends up winning that game 18-14. I still am amazed that they were able to win that after blowing that massive lead in Oxford. And so that was that was wild. And then last week against Texas A&M on Sunday, they had already clinched the series. They were trying to go for a sweep, and they fell behind. I think it was 10-3, or 10-4, after giving up a three-run home run in the sixth inning. And you're thinking, oh well, they're going to lose this. But sure enough, they were able to hit a 3-run home run that bottom of that inning and get back into it. And were able to. They actually loaded the bases with 1 out, and with arguably their 2 hottest hitters coming up to the plate in Matt Goodhart and Caden Wallace, and with down 1 and struck out both times and lost that game 11-10, really on the verge of another amazing comeback. So really, I think the issue on Sundays is they have pitching. They've been starting in Game 3 Lyle Lockhart, who was a grad transfer from Houston. He had been Houston's Friday night guy, and Houston's a solid baseball program. He didn't have great numbers at Houston, but he was an experienced veteran guy. And early on this year, he was giving Arkansas consistent, 5 innings. He would never go longer than that, but 5 innings of maybe only allowing 1 or 2 runs when you got an offense like Arkansas does. That's usually good enough on Sundays. But the last couple outings, they've pulled him early. In my opinion, who am I to question Dave Van Horn? He's won 1,000-something more games than me, but he pulled him after I think he had thrown only 51 pitches, and he pulled him in the 4th inning. He only went 3. He gave up a leadoff single in the 4th, and they yanked him. And I was just like, why would you do that? Because you're already asking your bullpen to do so much, and I think Arkansas has a good bullpen. It's not really reflected in the numbers, but I think part of that, in my opinion, my take is that they're asking some guys to do more than they should. They're asking a 1-inning guy to give them 2 or 3. They're asking a situational guy that should only be getting a lefty out or something like that. They're asking him to go an inning. And so that sometimes leads to inflated numbers. And I think that may be kind of an issue for Arkansas, especially this weekend. It's really weird because Arkansas played a doubleheader, 2 9-inning games on Saturday against Texas A&M, and then a 9-inning game. And actually, one of those went extra. So they played 19 innings on Saturday and then a full 9-inning game on Sunday. And then they're going to turn around and have to start this series on Thursday. So they've completely reshuffled their rotation, and they're actually leaving Sunday open right now as a TBA. And to be quite honest, I can give you several options of who they would start, but I don't know, and I don't think they'll know until after the second game. And it could really get hairy if they have to play a doubleheader on Friday.
And looking at weather.com right now, that is looking increasingly like a possibility. I think 100% chance of rain on Saturday. We'll see. Hopefully maybe that shifts or something. Andrew, and you actually took it the direction I was going to go anyway with the bullpen, but I was looking just from a statistical standpoint. I know there's a few different guys that have saves. Is the Kopp kid? I think it's Kevin Kopp. Correct me if I'm wrong on that. Is he
Kopps.
Sort of Kopps? Okay, sorry. Is he the closer? I noticed. I think a game last week he pitched like 4 innings, so you extended him out like you were talking about. But is he sort of, if it gets to the 9th inning, all else being equal, and Arkansas has a 1-run lead, is he like the shutdown guy that comes in, or how do they sort of, in a perfect world, split those things up?
So he is their guy. You're going to see him in wherever the biggest spot is. That may mean if Arkansas gets a starter who gives them 6 innings, which hasn't happened a lot, but it did happen in that second game against A&M, where Peyton Paulette gave them 6 shutout innings. Arkansas is clinging to a 1-run lead, 1-0 lead, and they went to Kevin Kopps, ideally to give him the last 3 innings, because he is a guy that can give you extended innings. He could be a long relief guy. And so they went with him, promptly gave up a home run to the first guy he faced. It was like he has like a ERA at the time was under 1, and he's been, All-American level type bullpen guy. But he ended up going 4 innings, through the 10th inning, and luckily Arkansas won it in the bottom of the 10th, or else he was going to be done after that. That's probably the most he would go in one game. But then there's been other games where I think it was the Ole Miss or Mississippi State series. I think it's the Ole Miss series where he pitched I think 3 innings in game 1, but he was really efficient, didn't throw many pitches. Then pitched an inning in game 2, and then also came back and pitched another inning in game 3. He's a 6th-year guy. He had Tommy John earlier in his career. He actually redshirted his first year. So he's been around for a long, long time. He's not a hard thrower. I mean, his fastball is going to be 92, 93, something like that. But his thing is he's got a cutter that is just incredible. I mean, it fools guys. I mean, he's got an incredible swing and miss rate. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's like somewhere around 30% in SEC play, which if you don't know, if people listening don't know what that is, that's a really, really high number for swing and miss. And he has just been really good about mixing it up. But he is their guy. The other bullpen arms that they have, you worry about. You're not quite sure what they're going to do. I mean, they may be really good, or they may just completely implode. Very kind of hit and miss. But Kevin Kopps, you kind of know, even when he's not great, like, I mean, against A&M this past weekend, he did not have his best stuff, but he still gave you 4 innings and only gave up the 1 run. So he's their guy, and you're going to see him in a high leverage situation, whether that be game 1, game 2, or game 3.
Andrew, one more thing that from me, at least that I had for you is, you just came from listening to Dave Van Horn, sort of preview the series, talk about his pitching. Did anything stand out in terms of his thoughts on South Carolina, whether it's individual matchups, South Carolina as a team, just your some information from his perspective, from what you heard in his press conference, since that's so fresh?
Yeah, I think the probably the most interesting thing, and something I'm actually going to be writing as soon as I get off of here, is just the way they're going to attack the pitching plan. I kind of talked about it a little bit, but they're going to be starting a guy named Caleb Bolden in game 1. He's kind of started and relieved. He's been very hit and miss. I mean, his first outing this year, he gave Arkansas 4 hitless innings out of the bullpen against Texas at that event in Arlington. So he's going to get the start. He's a right-hander. They're also going to start a right-hander, Peyton Paulette, in game 2. And then they're leaving game 3 TBA. And I mean, an option there would be Patrick Wicklander, but he's a lefty. But it sounds like, I mean, y'all can probably answer this better. I mean, it sounds like righties give South Carolina maybe a little bit more problems. Haven't dove into their lineup or anything, but that's what it kind of sounds like. So maybe you get, a Zebulon Vermillion. He actually missed this past weekend because of some arm soreness, but sounds like he's 100%. He's a guy who has started. He's relieved. He's been very, very good. Then he's been not so good in other outings. I mean, there was 8 innings of 1-hit ball against somebody, maybe Auburn or something, where he was really, really good. 8 innings against Louisiana Tech team that's top 20, top 15, depending on which poll you look at. But then they also get Connor Nolan back from injury. He's missed the past month and a half with an arm injury. But he's back, and he was Arkansas's Friday night starter last year during the shortened season, and was also in the rotation as a true freshman in 2019 when Arkansas made it to Omaha. He's back, and he's also a right-hander. I'm wondering if maybe he could start, especially if the game's on Saturday, but it doesn't sound like it'll be that case. But yeah, he's an option. So just based on what Van Horn said, it does sound like he's looking to go heavy with the right-handers as starting pitchers this weekend.
Yeah, and it's definitely a right-hand heavy lineup for South Carolina. So that makes sense. And they see a lot of right-handers, I guess, because of that. David Mendham, trying to think off the top, I think David Mendham's their only normal lefty in the starting lineup off the top of my head. So yeah, that would make sense. Andrew, man, we really appreciate the time. Great stuff. And by the way, if anybody listening or watching wants to read a little bit more or even watch Dave Van Horn's press conference, I think I saw y'all had it up. Y'all can all go over to hogbeat.com to read that perspective. And a couple of people have still been commenting, so I'm going to ask you, Andrew, what what is the word y'all are hearing your way on the Mike Woods situation? Was that as because everybody here has like put the 2 and 2 together, like, oh, he's going to follow Justin Stepp. From what we've heard, that's probably not the case. But what are y'all hearing there? Was that as out of nowhere there locally as it appeared to be from the outside looking in?
Completely out of left field. We kind of got a little bit of a wind of it maybe an hour or two before it made its way to message boards. And I mean, the first time I heard it, I was like, there's no way. I mean, he was going to be Arkansas's number 2 guy. I mean, they've got Treylon Burks, who's arguably the best receiver in the SEC this year. And Mike Woods was going to be a really good number 2. And just out of nowhere, it does sound like he's probably heading to somewhere like in Oklahoma, something like that's kind of like the hot rumor out there right now. But when it first happened, my first thought was maybe South Carolina, just because of Justin Stepp, because he was a guy that was recruited and committed to Justin Stepp at SMU before following him over to Arkansas, and they had a really great relationship. So it is a little bit surprising that it doesn't sound like, at least right now, things could change, that South Carolina is even really under consideration right now, just because of that connection.
Yeah, definitely, man. Well, hey, Andrew, again, we appreciate it, dude. Enjoy the games this weekend. Should be fun on both sides. I was saying when we started, this is sort of, if you're a fan out there, if you're in the media, these are the type series and games that this is why you follow sports, I feel like. So should be fun for both sides, man. Great insight, and we'll talk to you soon, okay?
Sounds good. Looking forward to this weekend.
All right, Andrew. Again, Andrew Hutchinson, hogbeat.com. Y'all go check him out. Good stuff from those guys. Good guys all around the Rivals Network. So we appreciate Andrew joining us and providing some insight there. I gotta say, Chris, my takeaway here, I don't go into this series in any way feeling like, A, just looking at the stats, B, listening to Andrew talk, this is not some unbeatable team. This is not some number 1 that's just head and shoulders above almost every single team they play. They're, at least statistically, and then him sort of confirming it, there are some real vulnerabilities as far as their pitching goes. They're having to sort of shuffle things a bit because the schedule actually worked out a little bit differently for them than it did for South Carolina with a Thursday, Friday may actually be best case scenario because South Carolina will be set up a little bit better from a pitching standpoint to be able to absorb, having a full 18 innings in one day if that happens on Friday. So I don't know, y'all. I'm sitting here feeling like South Carolina may win this thing this weekend.
I think it's possible, man. And I think, I go into it. This is just me personally. I really go into it feeling like it's 50-50 for a lot of reasons. I think the scary thing, if you're a South Carolina fan, team, player, coach, is obviously this Arkansas lineup, as Andrew laid out. They're absurdly good hitting the baseball. They've been pretty consistent with that all year. Not to say there haven't been games where they've scuffled a little bit, keeping in mind that they also play great competition. Again, one of the hardest schedules in the country, I think Arkansas plays. And you look at some of the numbers they put up, even in the SEC, and definitely against the lesser competition, they've knocked the cover off the ball a good bit, and statistically that bears it out. But I think it was interesting, and you hit on this, what Andrew said, that the vulnerabilities that Arkansas have are real vulnerabilities. I don't think he gave the sense that it was just they've had a few games here and there where something's just sort of gone wrong. That the vulnerabilities have been evident even when they've won, right? They've, sometimes the pitching's let them down. Arkansas has been good enough to hit the ball, come back, and win. They've almost blown some leads. This is a team that's only lost 6 games all year. They're 30-6, but they have shown some vulnerabilities, and it is on the pitching side. So I think if you're South Carolina, here's what you hang your hat on in thinking about this, and is that, I go back to Sunday again with the Will Sanders factor, particularly when you look at Arkansas. Maybe you thin them out a little bit in the bullpen. Maybe their starter, whoever it may be, is TBA right now on that day, is not going to be as good as a Will Sanders. Maybe you can cool Arkansas's bats a little bit. And South Carolina has been a team that at times they've been hot and cold with the bats, but they've shown the ability to hit right? I mean, they've been able to string together some power when they're on, when they're hitting for power, when they're knocking extra base hits, when they're hitting with runners in scoring position. They're really, really good. And I think you look at Arkansas, they've given up some runs, even in games they've lost. They've given up, 11 to A&M. They've given up 14 to Ole Miss, 13 to Ole Miss. They gave up 16 to Alabama in one game. They lost the game 16-1 to Alabama. So I think South Carolina is going to be one of the better teams they played. Not the best, we'll see. But some of those vulnerabilities, I think South Carolina could take advantage of if they play well enough.
Yeah, and just from a statistical standpoint, that if you're Arkansas, and obviously they have their record, it bears it out. They are a really, really good baseball team. I'm not saying they're not. But in Columbia, long trip out here, possibly playing 3 games in 2 days. They played a bunch of games on Saturday and Sunday, or a bunch of innings on Saturday and Sunday, I should say. And I don't know. I think it sets up well for the Gamecocks because they have struggled to find, you look at the teams that have given South Carolina trouble. It's been from really, really talented pitchers. And, and maybe these Arkansas guys, that's one thing we didn't really ask them about as far as their stuff. Like how are these Arkansas pitchers extremely talented? They're just inconsistent. I'm sure if they're recruited to that program as good as they've been lately, they're talented dudes. But the just true shutdown type pitchers have given South Carolina trouble. Once you get more to the good, not great pitchers, or then the average SEC pitchers, that's when South Carolina can get things going offensively and actually put up, crooked numbers, so to speak. So even the LSU guy that pitched Friday, or I guess it was Thursday technically, that guy, I know what LSU's record was, numbers, blah, blah. I don't care. That guy was very, very talented. That guy had great stuff. So, we'll see. But I come in, I just like the matchup for South Carolina, at least statistically. I mean, Arkansas leading the planet in home runs right now. But guess what? Statistically, South Carolina's pitching staff, if you look at SEC rankings, South Carolina has allowed fewer home runs than anybody else in the entire conference. So you actually have a great versus great matchup as far as how these teams sort of intersect. So statistics don't win games. I know that. But at least on paper, there are reasons to feel good about this from a South Carolina perspective. Not to mention the fact you are playing it here in Columbia as opposed to traveling all the way out there to Arkansas, which obviously is it's different. When kids have to travel, it matters. There's a reason there's home field advantage in sports. So we'll see. It's going to be a fun weekend, y'all. South Carolina has allowed just 24 home runs this year. Again, Arkansas has hit 70, which according to Andrew is above the pace when they hit their record number of home runs a couple of years ago. So we'll see. We had a question earlier. I think it was T who asked any thoughts on the shakeup in the order with the weekend rotation. No, I mean, I don't think you mix anything up right now. I know South Carolina needs to fare better on Fridays. And for the purpose of the show, we're just game ones are Fridays. That's what SEC ball is. I know this week it's Thursday and whatever. For their Friday guy is Thomas Farr right now. I know they have not won those games here recently, but I don't think, especially with a Thursday, Friday, Saturday matchup, the number one team in the country, you ride your guy. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But I don't think you change anything right now. If it was, maybe going into next week when you have an extra week of rest or an extra day of rest going into next week, I think it goes back to Friday, Saturday, Sunday. I'm speaking out of turn without actually checking that. Maybe you look at it. But this week, no, roll with your guys. Hope you can get him a little more. He has he's not been quite himself, but he has not gotten great run support either. So it's not like they've just been bashing the cover off the ball in game one and the pitching staff has let them down. That's not really how it's played out. You've faced really good pitching in game ones, and then South Carolina's pitching has been not quite good enough. So that happens in this league. We'll see what happens this weekend. But I'm telling you, I'm sitting here on paper. I like where South Carolina is going into this.
So on the record, I just tweeted it out. You're on the record as a sweep for South Carolina. Good to know. Thank you for that.
Yes, 100%.
Somebody's going to come back and say that.
Two out of three. My prediction: 2 out of 3 Gamecocks. Let's see. And Hope says it does go back to Friday through Saturday next week. But yeah, I got 2 out of 3 South Carolina.
There you go.
I'll be curious to see. And somebody was asking about the schedule earlier. Nothing official yet on if they're going to have to play the 2 on Friday. But you can't get to Saturday having known it's probably going to rain, 100% chance of rain, and then be like, oh, sorry, it rained. Like this is too big of a series for both teams.
That's right.
If you know it's 100% and it remains that way, you got to go ahead and play them Friday, I think.
Yeah, you do. And I think, some great points made earlier. I think it was Lynn Turner said on Facebook, hitting his let us down on Friday nights. That's what you mentioned, Wes. Thomas Farr has not gotten great run support. And, I think with Farr, it's a little bit different because there's 2 things. A, he has stuff, right? That's obvious. And B, there's a body of work, not just from last year, although there was that too, but you had a body of work from this season, the same season where he was shutting people down and pitching extremely well. Has he scuffled a little bit in the last few starts? Yes. And I will say, to his credit, even then, he's gotten himself in some trouble and has wiggled out of it a little bit. Like it could have been a lot worse in terms of the amount of runs given up. He's just, in some cases, gotten off to a slower start even before settling down. So would it be significant for South Carolina if he could return to that beginning of season form? Absolutely. But I think bottom line is you're going to have to hit the ball better in game 1 anyways. And that's been the theme. Drop game 1 because your pitching scuffles a little bit, and probably even more importantly, your hitting lets you down. And then game 2, you eke out a win. Game 3, you're able to go and win that game too. So if that's a similar formula, South Carolina surely takes that. You take 2 of 3 in the series, obviously against the number 1 team in the country any way that you can. But I think against Arkansas, especially in game 1, you're going to have to rely on and count on getting better run support because this is an Arkansas team that's going to be, call it like it is. They're going to be the most explosive team in terms of power, on base percentage thing, and some of those other metrics that South Carolina's faced all year.
Yeah, and like we said, man, they don't go swinging at bad pitches. They will take their walks. So that's to me one of the most impressive things about their team, not just the pure power, the fact that they make you get them out. Like they aren't going to get themselves out, and that's impressive. I think you can circle at the end of this series. You can circle number of walks allowed by South Carolina, and if that's a lower number, I feel pretty good about South Carolina winning. If that's a higher number, then South Carolina probably is not feeling good about this series after the fact. So we'll see. We're going to have – normally we have Colin Taylor on, obviously on Friday. We'll probably still – depending on game times and stuff like that, we'll adjust. We'll probably have Colin on Friday and talk about what happened on Thursday and what's about to happen, the rest of the weekend there. Spring game still right now, as we sit, 2:50 p.m. on Wednesday, still planned for 2 p.m. Chris, I don't know, man. Like when all this first started, I was like, oh, they're definitely going to have a spring game. You don't just cancel a spring game. The more I looked at the weather, the more I thought about the team being banged up anyway. The more I looked back at what Shane Beamer said yesterday about, the number of injuries they already have. I hope there's a spring game.
Yeah.
I'm not really willing to say, oh, that's just talk. They're definitely going to have it. Am I alone there? Do you think there's a real chance they could not play Saturday?
Yeah. The first where everybody went with that at first is, oh, you move it. And then, what we heard from the press conference Shane Beamer had this week was, because you're up against it from a calendar standpoint, it's not really feasible. Your options are very limited to move it. So that would just mean you shelve it, because it's the end of spring. It happens to be the last spring practice. It is a spring practice technically. So then you just have to shelve it. So, yeah, I mean, that's something. I mean, we're going to dig into it. We're still here on Wednesday. We can look at the forecasts. We can say, oh, this doesn't look so great, which it doesn't. But we'll have to wait and see how it plays out. And it's certainly something I anticipate, man, we're going to be digging on a little bit more over the next 48 hours or so. But it is serious enough to probably continue to check on that and track it. But I am with you in that I very much hope that it happens. As limited as it may be, as less than ideal as it may be with some guys being held out and things like that, I know a lot of the fans are looking forward to it. We're looking forward to it, to be able to get a better look and get some eyeballs on some guys.
Yeah, no doubt. We'll see. I don't, and like we said, you can't really move it back. I don't know if they would. Now, I know obviously they were still going to have it on Saturday, and there was going to be a baseball game on Saturday as well. Would they push it up to Friday? And I mean, there's a lot of logistics that go to last minute moving something up, from crowd control to the police, and as far as how they get traffic in and out, and the fact that you may have two big baseball games against the number one team in the country on Friday. Does the athletic department want to do all those things at the same time? I don't know. We'll certainly see. You also do not want to have guys when you've already – one of the absolute keys to South Carolina this spring was to stay as healthy as possible. And that means avoiding the big one, the big injury. Do you want guys sloshing around out there in the rain for a meaningless game and potentially getting hurt if you don't have to?
Yep.
Probably not. So we'll see. And I mean, we're about to get off here, but I'm going to hit this question from Craig. Is this staff getting a pass with all these injuries? They killed Muschamp about these injuries. I mean, all right, first of all, Muschamp got killed because of the constant in-season serious injuries.
Missing games injuries.
Yes, to the point of the fact that if you looked back, it seemed to be a trend both at Florida and at South Carolina. And a lot of people pointed to the strength and conditioning program as being – now, who can quantify what that was? How much of that actually was from that. But people at some point, it got to the point of, well, this is just – there has to be some correlation here. I think it's where the fan base as a whole, the mindset went, fair or not. Well, there's a difference between big season-ending injuries. Some of those are just bad luck. And spring injuries. Part of the reason with the spring injuries, if they already have a roster where they are thin at DB, thin at linebacker. So if you start having injuries at certain positions, you literally can't field two teams as part of it. But, knock on wood, for the kids' sake, they haven't had the big injury this spring. And that's the thing. A lot of these bumps and bruises, guys would be playing in the fall. So also, it's April 21st. So I don't think you can – and I say that in terms of how long has Luke Day been on campus? You can't implement changes if you are one of these people who believes that strength and conditioning was to blame for the issues. Then you can't say, well, that's not something that can be fixed in 4 months, is the point I'm getting at. So you also, the question, Bartholomew was running second team walk on with the DBs. They inherited the roster that they inherited, and they lost 5 defensive backs that contributed to last season. So some of the DBs are literally not on campus yet. They're waiting on them to get here because it's the spring, not the summer. So there's only so much a new staff can do at this point with what they've inherited, and even you can say, well, why didn't they recruit more guys? Well, they have. They're just literally not on campus yet. So I think we all are going to have to be realistic with the expectations for this roster moving forward, and that it's not going to be fixed overnight. It's just not. And I think a key to this season, part of the reason injuries are such a big deal at South Carolina is South Carolina has not had the depth to withstand injuries. Every team, every program has some injuries. The really good programs have the injuries and have somebody waiting in the wings who's ready to step in and play anyway.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that. I will say there have been times by season's end, a couple of the past few years, or even your depth that you have built up is sort of depleted though, right? I mean, I always go back to the one example that I like to give is the Clemson game a few years ago where Brad Johnson's out there playing and he's been sick all week and he plays like 100 snaps. He plays like every special team and a ton of defensive snaps because the depth is so depleted at that point by injury. So I wouldn't get too worried about injuries in spring football. And I don't even know if we should use the term injuries. You have some guys coming off injuries. You have some guys that are a little banged up. Shane Beamer even said during a press conference, there are a lot of these guys that would be playing if it's a game week. It's what we said on yesterday's show, I think it was, Wes. There's a difference between playing injured and playing hurt. If you play college football, you're playing hurt. You might go into game one, fine. You're playing hurt every other week after that probably because if you play football, you're getting hit, you're going to be hurt. So, yeah, I mean, and you go back to defensive back. I mean, this team has, I think, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I mean, there's 6 or 7 scholarship like guys who are listed as corners on this roster. And a couple of those were brought in, and David Spalding and Marcellus Dial are guys who are first year in this program. We know Joey Hunter was dealing with an injury. We know Darius Rush had something a while back where he was coming off of. So, I mean, it's a mix. And I don't – if we're sitting here at week 7 of the 2021 season and half the team's too injured to play, okay, assess things and how are guys injured and what's going on. But we're not anywhere close to that at this point.
Yeah, so we'll see what happens. To answer the specific questions there, Craig, I mean, it's easy to see, especially if you're splitting guys up and trying to split up the reps, why a walk-on would be number 2 right now in a scrimmage situation. I mean, you can go back. Joey Hunter's been hurt, I think, most of the time. Dom Hill has played, has practiced, but has been in the blue non-contact a lot of times. So if you're in a scrimmage situation, you're limiting him. O'Donnell Fortune has played a lot, but go back. I think Cam Smith has missed some time in scrimmage situations. So then in that case, O'Donnell Fortune may have been working with the ones, which would push your third or fourth guys up into the second string area. So, there was a time when Marcellus Dial, I think when we were out there for the defensive depth chart, Marcellus Dial wasn't on the field, then we saw him come back out. So if Dial and Cam happen to be out for a practice, then all your 2s are now starters and all your 3s are now, that's how you end up with second string guys playing, or walk-on guys playing as second string guys. So we all knew defensive backfield, not a area right now where South Carolina has a lot of depth. They'll have to continue to try to build that. I think can some of these kids coming in, Carlin Splittell, he's going to have to play. I think he's got to play a lot this year for South Carolina. What they can get out of him will obviously determine, how good and how deep that position could be. So we'll see. All right, y'all, that's an hour right there. We'll appreciate everybody for joining us. Thanks for Andrew Hutchinson for joining us from hogbeat.com. Go check out their site. Great stuff from them. Outstanding job covering that baseball program. If you want to read up on Arkansas before this weekend, you'll have a great idea of what to expect from them. Appreciate his insight. Appreciate all of our listeners, watchers. Appreciate people on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, and on the podcast audio version as well. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll, of course, have complete coverage of the South Carolina-Arkansas series on GamecockCentral.com, and we'll be back on Friday afternoon to talk about what's happened so far with that and preview the spring game. We'll talk to you then.